Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Salesforce and 2xU webinar, How to Make 2020 the Year of Retail. I'm Ali Thiem, the editor of Power Retail, and it's lovely to have you all here. Very shortly, I'll introduce our speakers, but before I do have some quick housekeeping. I suggest you all switch your phones to silent. You really don't want to miss out on any of these and meaningful insights today. If you have any questions for our presenters, please type them in the questions section of the pop-up on the right. We will do our best to answer as many as possible at the end of the session. So today we have James Johnson, the Director of Retail Industry Strategy at Salesforce, Amanda Green, Head of Global Digital Commerce at 2xU, and Grant Arnott, the Founder and Managing Director of Power Retail. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. Consumer shopping trends are coming in from left, right, and centre. There are so many that it can be easy to lose track, but which ones will e-commerce actually follow? This webinar will help understand the trends to watch based on the 2019 buying season in Australia. From the latest retail insights from the NRF Big Retail Show to the adapting customer experience, today's webinar will dissect how we can make 2020 the year of retail. Without further ado, I'll pass things over to James, who'll kick off the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ali, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to geek out a little bit and share a whole range of data and insights with you today. Really looking forward to having a great discussion with Grant and Amanda from 2xU and Power Retail as well. What we're going to be looking at from a data perspective are really the taps, clicks and preferences of almost 500 million consumers that interact with sites that are powered by Salesforce Commerce Cloud. That gives us a really unique on an aggregated and anonymous basis around what those macro shopper journeys and shopper trends are, be that around device usage, be that around shopper journeys, add to cart ratios, checkout rates and the like. On top of that, we also complete a range of global surveys and mystery shopping to really understand why consumers are completing particular activities. And we think that gives a really clear view of shopper habits, and how you can translate that into retail success for your business. One of the key areas I want to kick off today is really looking at how retailers have slayed their Christmas trade. So what we see here is really an encapsulation of a whole range of data we've seen through November and December of last year as the peak Christmas or holiday trade season. So lots of numbers here, but I want to call out a number of key trends and data points. Fundamentally, we've seen massive growth in app notifications and consumer messaging. So over November and December, more than 160 billion messages sent via the Marketing Cloud platform. Now that's a great opportunity to get in front of customers, but if we're talking messaging, if we're talking app notifications, that can be very personal for consumers. So you need to make sure you've got something meaningful to say. One of the other key aspects we're seeing through the consumer lens is, unsurprisingly, consumers are very mobile. Now, we've over-indexed as Australian consumers for a number of years there, leading the way in terms of mobile uses, both for traffic and for orders. And what we saw through the holiday period was that on specific peak days, more than 80% of traffic and more than 60% of orders were actually completed on mobile devices. So all up, year-over-year growth of more than 34% in terms of mobile orders. If we then look at the nature of peak, and it's called peak for a reason because it can be quite peaky in terms of the scale of the operations you need to deal with. From a technical perspective, you need to understand how your technology and your capabilities scale and how you can service customers. But it's also critical that you understand all of the touch points across your business and how they scale, be that logistics, customer service teams, merchandising, replenishment, and the like. And the last key takeaway that I want to share from the data here is the almost 10% revenue impact from artificial intelligence. Now at Salesforce, we call that Einstein, and really it's continuing to have a material impact on both consumers and retailers. So for retailers, it's helping drive an increase in orders or an increase in items per orders. From a consumer perspective, we're really helping customers find that next product that they need or that next offer in a more simplified and streamlined way. Let's look at the data now from primarily an ANZ lens, and really what we've seen and what I've noted in discussions with retailers for the past few months is very much November is where the majority of the action has been happening. So we see that in the data set as well. what we're looking at here is Boxing Day in the light blue, so Cyber Week in the darker blue, and this is year-over-year growth on what are traditionally really key trading days. So what you can see for Australia, the UK and Canada, which historically have been markets where Boxing Day was prevalent as a key shopping period, really we're seeing the growth of Cyber Week has been consistent across all these markets. And in an Australian context, almost 6 times faster growth than Boxing Day on a year-over-year basis. So if you look at that in totality, absolutely lots is happening in November. It's really important that as retailers, we're agile and responding to those changing consumer needs. But importantly, if you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics data that's come out overall for the December quarter, we're still seeing a growing retail sector. So whilst the timing is pivoting and that can be some challenges to operate in the business, overall we're seeing good growth. What I wanted to share was also some insights into a recently published report that we have released called the Connected Shoppers Report. And this really is looking at why consumers are undertaking particular activities. And fundamentally, what we're looking at here is this concept of shopping moving to the edge and consumers interacting on their own terms. So historically, as a retailer, we would put a whole lot of effort into acquiring customers to come into store or to come onto our digital properties. And that's still important, but it's also important that we're blending that mix and spending time where consumers are, interacting with them, be that in a content or a commerce sense, where they're spending time and where they choose to interact. So from the broader research, we've seen some really clear and prevalent trends. We're seeing the emergence of emerging digital purchase points like voice or social media, which is now almost 10% of overall purchases on a global basis. We under-index there slightly in Australia, but we're absolutely growing very rapidly. We've seen that 2/3 of consumers are very comfortable in terms of using multiple channels to complete a single transaction. So that might be their laptop and a mobile device, that might be a physical and a digital interaction, but consumers are very comfortable to start and stop that shopper journey at any one point and really use those multiple touch points to complete their goal. Along that same vein, we see that 2/3 of consumers are very comfortable purchasing from mobile devices, and we see that in the numbers. From a generational shift though, Gen Zers, Gen Yers are even more excited and capable to purchase items on those emerging channels, be that social, even gaming consoles. So if we wrap that up very quickly from a holiday perspective, really there's some key takeaways. Number one is that the store is absolutely key to success in terms of that blended and extended bricks and mortar approach. The opportunity here is to really focus on that seamless experience from a customer perspective. Second point is that the store is everywhere. We know the customer is everywhere. We need to be able to respond, meet that customer demand, deliver that great experience, and be where the shopper is at that right time. And the third point, and it really reiterates the 10% impact we're seeing from artificial intelligence overall, is that AI is ready for prime time. And we're seeing some great results for a number of customers here about getting that right product to the right customer at the right time, but importantly, at scale. So doing that in a scaled way that is delivering value both for that retailer and also the customer. And underpinning all of those themes are really 3 key areas of focus that I recommend for retailers. One is to really have a differentiated proposition. How are you different from your competitor? Why should customers shop with you? What do you stand for? Why should consumers care? You need to be able to have that clarity internally within your business, be able to empower your workforce with that information, and also be able to communicate that clearly to your customers. Second point's around personalization. And as we know, retail is moving to the small screen, the mobile devices that we've seen from the data. So getting that right experience in a mobile context is really key. And we've seen that overall time spent shopping in a digital sense has decreased over the past few years, which makes it even more critical to get that right offer, get that right product in front of the customer at the right time. And then being nimble is really important, whether that is termed agility or being nimble. Really, it's about how can you deliver an experience over product from a retail perspective? How can you think sustainability over value? How can you push yourself beyond the confines of your 4 walls to interact where consumers are? And I think the important bit here is that it can be incremental. It doesn't need to be a big bang approach, but how can you ensure that you're understanding, listening to what your customer needs and helping deliver towards that. What I wanted to do was just reflect briefly on some of the key themes that we've seen coming out of NRF 2020 at New York. And really along that theme that I mentioned of being nimble, what I saw in total was that retailers had to be able to adapt to the level of change in the industry, and they had to be able to adapt more rapidly. So I've coined that more change faster. So what are we seeing in terms of some of these trends? First one is that the retail apocalypse has not happened. Absolutely, there are challenges in various subsectors of retail. Consumer confidence in the Australian market is absolutely a challenge. But we're seeing that online continues to grow in influence, and a range of store and format changes can be a great way to drive success. Along with that consumer confidence, really a big trend towards going back to both basics and having a customer focus. It's clear that consumers are more demanding than ever. Shiny and exciting execution can be important, but really offering true utility is key from a consumer perspective. As part of that, sustainability and trust were really key themes and overwhelmingly important. Consumers are voting with their wallets here. They want to spend money with brands and retailers that align with their values. I've turned the next point omnichannel blur, and it's really clear that omnichannel is continuing to grow, and the lines are blurring between digital and physical experiences. So really seeing the continued removal of the term channels in the customer vernacular. Customers don't use that language. How can we as retailers make sure we're just providing a seamless experience overall? Really starting to see that the role of store is changing. So it's more experiential. Store is absolutely being a hub for leveraging things like online shopping support. Some great examples we saw in New York, where they have very limited or no stock at all in the store, but using stores as an amazing place for pickups and returns, for sizing and try-ons, for alterations, and to provide outstanding service. There's an emergence of retailers that are providing this retail as a service concept around curated content offerings. So neighborhood goods was the darling of NRF in terms of a lot of discussion, but also the show fields and a few other examples that worked really well in New York. And I'm personally really excited to see how that will translate and evolve in other markets. Really linked to sustainability and trust, very clear focus on resale and re-commerce gaining traction. ThredUp doing some really interesting plays here, partnering with Macy's and partnering with other retailers to really drive that outcome. As part of the changing role of the store, we're also seeing an evolving role of the store team. So the role that a team member in your store has needs to change and evolve. The training and the enablement that you have for those team members needs to evolve. What their KPIs in terms of what does success look like for them needs to evolve. And some great examples I'm sure we'll dig into in our discussion a little later. Big trend and lots of capabilities around mobile and vision, robotics and AI, particularly in the inventory space. And then lastly, a number of retail partnerships, really rethinking about using partnerships from a foot traffic generation perspective, and also augmenting other areas of the business that may be counterintuitive initially. So fundamentally, lots going on, lots of discussion that was really exciting and really builds up my momentum and excites me as a retail optimist. Fundamentally, it's about that more change faster and how retailers can understand those trends and adapt their business to those. To give us a bit more detail, I'd love to hand over to Grant to share what we're seeing from our recent Australian online shopping report.
Thanks very much, James. And yeah, fascinating wrap up of all of what's happening and also the NRF Big Show and some of the key findings there. Certainly, I was lucky enough to attend that one. I saw you there, and much of that was very much in line with what we learned. What I'm going to talk about now, look, Salesforce, so Power Retail and Salesforce, we've partnered up and we've produced a report called the Australian Online Shopping Experience. And for that, we conducted 8,079 interviews randomly selected from Power Retail's panel of over 650,000 Australian multi-channel shoppers, all very recent during November 2019. And the majority of these interviewees that you're going to see the data from now have an annual household income between 100,000 and 149,000, with a combination of household breakdowns, a pretty even split between couples, adults with at least one dependent under 10, and adults with all dependents over the age of 10. So a good overall mix of survey respondents. The majority of those spend between $21 and $200 online on new products each month. And the results of the survey also mirror accepted online shopping profiles in that females are strongly represented, with 72% of the respondents, with the age distribution reflecting that of the general population. So this data is really good quality, great sample set, and you'll be sent a copy of this report after it. But I'm just going to pull out some of the key highlights from our perspective. The survey revealed much about the central themes of mobility, integration and engagement, as well as vital and practical insights for guiding retailers with their current and future strategy. So I'll start with mobility. So we asked the question, generally, do you prefer to shop on apps or websites? And on average, shoppers have 4.4 retailer or marketplace apps on their smartphones, which was higher than we thought it would be. This would seem conducive to regular shopping via apps, yet 79% of shoppers still prefer shopping via websites rather than apps. But on the flip side, a significant portion, so more than 1 in 5 shoppers now prefers apps as their primary means of shopping. And we expect this to grow as the ease, convenience, security and personalization of these native apps continues to improve the shopping experience. We next asked the question, why do you prefer to shop on apps? So for those that do shop on apps, the primary reason is that they're perceived as easier to use than websites. So 59% claimed that they were easier to use than websites, and 50% claiming that they're more convenient, particularly with respect to ease of payments and personal account management. Also, 38% perceive there are more functions available on apps, and a small number value the exclusive products and exclusive offers that are available via native apps, which I think presents retailers with an opportunity to make that a more prevalent focus of their retailer apps to make that a higher priority than just being easy to use. On the next question that we asked, so when in store, how often do you research or compare the price of items online using your smartphone or tablet? James was talking earlier about the distributed nature of shopping today, and this graphic really shows that an overwhelming proportion of retail app users, so 75% in total, research or compare prices in a physical store via smartphone or tablet. So showrooming is a big thing, but also just gathering information on products as well while they're in store. 13% always do this, 25% usually do it, and 37% sometimes do this. So the prevalence of this behavior is vital from a strategic perspective for brick and mortar retailers, multi-channel and pure play retailers alike, which impacts each in a variety of ways, but offers ways to leverage such behavior, be it in-store or online. When we asked the question, what are the main things you use retailer apps for? The highest response was for price checking. So 36% of respondents said they use it primarily for price checking versus purchasing was only 31%. Still high usage, but price checking is the primary use of retailer apps. So food for thought there when it comes to the retail marketing journey. Order tracking is high on the list also, with customers increasingly expecting transparency over every stage of their order's journey and valuing that transparency, according to our data, higher than the speed of delivery. So customers would prefer to know exactly where their order is at than get it there as fast as possible. That is certainly coming through in our data. And the interplay of app and mobile is seen again here, with 21% using their apps to check in-store availability. So again, it's that distributed commerce journey. On the social side, so how often do you buy directly from social media apps like Instagram or Facebook without going to a retailer or brand website? It's still early days, but the majority of shoppers have purchased directly on a platform such as Facebook or Instagram without going directly to the retailer website. So while only 1% always do this, 23% in total sometimes or usually do this, 28% rarely do it, and the remaining 49% may not necessarily shop directly via an app. However, it's still significant that just on half or just slightly higher than half of the online shoppers surveyed have shopped directly via the social media platform without going to a retailer or a brand website. So if you don't have this as part of your marketing mix or your UX now, you are missing out on a significant portion of opportunities for your buyers to get to you. And these statistics indicate there's ample room for retailers and brands to leverage social media via shoppable posts and influencers in order to make the most of how consumers are using apps today. Now we get down to how we shop, and this was always fun and interesting. I go straight to 21% shopping on the toilet, but look, the context of how people shop is evolving all the time, and that has serious ramifications again for retail marketers. That's going to challenge conventional strategy. The purchase funnel has been forever altered, and there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Multi-screening is an enormous part of shopper behaviour. You can see that 64% of Australians are browsing or shopping online while concurrently watching TV. And similarly, 42% do their research or actively shop while on social media. And while boredom is a great driver, 56% heading online to shop while in bed, 46% browse while waiting for someone or something, and 27% on a commute by train or Uber. All of those things have significant ramifications for your retail marketing timings, whether it's email marketing or notifications or whatever it might be, when you consider how mobile the online shopping experience is these days, and where and when people are doing their online shopping and the context in which they're doing their online shopping. And just a final one, 47% actively head online to shop or browse while they're not partaking in any other activity, which is good. Do you agree with the following statements about online shopping? So 64% said that online shopping is a regular part of their lives. However, almost the same number, 63%, are still worried about online scams and fraud. And that reveals there is an element of trust and confidence that is still an issue for a significant portion of consumers. Similarly, 61% are worried about how personal data is being used by online retailers. So all of us on the webinar today are likely involved in the retail space and retail marketing. And so we're very hard at trying to get those personal details for our loyalty programs, for our understanding of the customer, thinking that we're doing them a favor by creating more relevant and personalized content. And we want to deliver personalization on the pretext that that is going to help consumers, that is going to be what consumers want. But it's still very important to understand the concern around how personal data is being used by online retailers and the skepticism with which that's viewed. So trust markers and fraud prevention need to be central to any strategy for retailers and brands, with such a majority of Aussies flagging this as something that concerns them. And transparency with how their data is being used is also critical. And as we've seen with James's insights on peak season shopping, over a third of online shoppers, so 37% of online shoppers, are aware of and now plan their shopping around major online sales events. So participation in those events is absolutely critical for retailers. James talked about the movement into November of the peak season of shopping, and these online shopping events are known about by the vast majority of Australian shoppers now, and they plan their shopping around these activities. Next question we asked was, from what type of retailer did you make your last online purchase? And this was really interesting and counter to what we predicted, and that's while the number of marketplaces in Australia continues to grow, our research shows that the majority of Australian shoppers still prefer to shop at their online stores directly. 24% though in total shopped either via a marketplace or a marketplace app. It's also worth noting too, we talk a lot about voice commerce and the rise of voice commerce in Australia with the prevalence of speaker devices and the growing penetration of speaker devices like Google Home and Amazon Echo in the household. And whilst that is growing, their use as retail devices or shopping devices is relatively minimal. And no one from our survey said that they made any purchases via a voice-activated device, which we thought was really interesting. So still, despite predictions of high growth in that area, still yet to be materialised. Our payment methods, so we all know about buy now, pay later and the rapid rise of that over the last 12 months to 2 years. And 40% of our consumers surveyed paid for their last purchase via PayPal. Credit cards come in second in terms of consumer preference at 27.7%, and Afterpay followed relatively closely behind at almost 14%. Given its comparative time on the market as a payment platform and that it's currently in third place for consumer preferences, retailers should certainly be taking note that buy now, pay later has had a massive impact and needs to be taken into account with both short-term and long-term strategies. And if you look at this chart in particular, sorry, I'll slip back there, is the prevalence of buy now, pay later at the under 30 age group, which is a given that it's very much a product for millennials, and how that tapers down as people get older. The usage of buy now, pay later and debit cards declines, but interestingly, PayPal actually continues to rise into the older brackets, which again was something that we weren't expecting, but was certainly coming through in the research. How do you prefer retailers to communicate promotions and offers to you? Well, good old-fashioned email is still overwhelmingly the favorite. So 72% prefer offers to be made via email, which speaks to how consumers engage with retailers and how they expect to be communicated to. Only 12% preferred text messages for promotional communication, which again reveals the way consumers want to use their phones. Those phones are a means for shoppers to hold the power to connect with retailers when and where they want on their own terms. And the intersect between private data concerns, communication and smartphone usage and shopper preferences here is very clear. You really have to be invited into that world of the smartphone. We also asked the question, how many times in the last 12 months have you bought from the place where you placed your last online order, to get a gauge of customer loyalty? And the majority, the fortunate news is the majority of the last online purchases were repeat purchases. In fact, 35% have purchased from the same retailer 2 to 5 times in the last year, with 13% purchasing 6 to 12 times in the last 12 months, and 8% purchasing on average more than once per month. So the online customer, despite the fact that they have a world of choice at their disposal, are actually loyal shopping customers if you deliver that right experience, and you can get them to keep coming back to your store. And the last question we asked, James talked about the growth ahead in retail, seeing really strong growth in retail across the board, and we're seeing the same predicted in our research, which is available in the report. In the next 6 months, do you think that the amount you spend a month on non-essential shopping will increase? 19% said increase, 69% said stay about the same, and 12% said it would decline. So this bodes well for the e-commerce economy in 2020, which is driving currently the majority of growth in retail spending. So I'll wrap up now just with a few takeaways, just in terms of a quick focus for 2020. So the first thing is every channel counts. So cover your bases with unified commerce. Remember that the point of purchase is so distributed now. You really need to look at having a point of purchase and a presence across all of the channels, and bringing that back to unified commerce so that there's a really strong message there. And look, I've got to say Salesforce is one of the best platforms across the board to be able to assist with that. The next one, buy now, pay later, is going to continue to dominate payment growth. While it's still not the majority of the market currently, the rate of growth and the penetration and the emerging generation that is brought up on buy now, pay later and will continue to use it is going to continue to grow. So it is going to dominate the growth in the payment space. When it comes to customers, we're going to see an increased focus on loyalty and customer value, and utilizing data, and James talked about that earlier, but utilizing data that you have on customers to keep them coming back, to keep increasing the customer value, rather than the all-out quest for total customer volume. So you're going to see retailers harvesting and farming their customers more than going all out on the hunt for new customers, because that's going to be really important in extracting value in this age of heavy discounting and the high proliferation of sales. And finally, marketplaces. The interesting part of this was marketplaces are very prolific, but customers still predominantly want to shop with retail stores. And what that's a sign of is those stores, those Australian businesses have invested and continue to invest in improving their online experience. And yes, they have a presence on the marketplaces, and marketplaces certainly have their place within the Australian retail landscape. But it's great to see that the stores are also able to stand alone, and as they continue to invest in that customer experience, keep retaining that customer spend. So all of this is fleshed out much further in the report, as I said, that we'll send out earlier. That's just a quick snapshot. But what we're going to do now, we've got our guest speaker waiting on the line, which is Amanda Green. Is the head of global digital commerce for 2XU, and we're going to welcome Amanda now and have a little fireside chat without fire. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks, Grant.
Look, thanks for joining us today. And Amanda, you, like James and myself, you also attended the NRF Big Show last month. What were some of your highlights and key takeaways from that?
It was a massive show. I've never seen an event on like such a huge scale in Australia before. So it was great to see something like that in New York. Really, the whole sort of show was really just an inspiration in sort of that everything we do online or even in store should really represent one strong brand. That channel doesn't matter. We should just be really focusing on how we provide the best experience possible and cater to our sort of consumer wants and needs. While I was there, I was lucky enough to go on sort of a retail tour with Salesforce, visiting some of the best of the New York's retail stores, and that show fields and neighborhood goods stores that James sort of mentioned before, they were really interesting in showing new retail sort of marketplaces or as a service. There were stores like Camp Toys, which showed how to really truly engage the consumer, both young and old, and changing out their in-store experience and making it magical every sort of 6 weeks, which was just amazing. Stores like Gucci, who have really made their brand more accessible through really luxurious but immersive execution, but it wasn't alienating at the same time. So showing all these retail experiences that were really changing the way a consumer interacts with them and really speaking to what the consumer wants as opposed to what the brand just wants them to see. And I think finally out of all of that was also the Amazon 4-star store, which I know has mixed opinions for many people, but I really found it fascinating because for me it was like shopping a website, but actually in real life, where you walked through the store and the visual merchandising of the store wouldn't have made sense in any other store. But when you layer the fact that it's an Amazon store and it's actually informed by user interactions online and what they like, it actually kind of made sense. So I found it really interesting to sort of shop the store and found it a bit logical, but at the same time, different to anything else I'd experienced. But
yeah,
within the
yeah,
sort of
look, sorry, sorry to cut you off. I certainly agree with all of that, and that was certainly something that I took away from the event. That it's almost like the retailers, particularly the bigger brand retailers across New York, have conceded that the transactional component now really largely takes place online. Logistics are so much more efficient and effective at getting the goods to the customer than a store perhaps can be, and so they're turning those stores into brand experiences and showrooms. Yes, there's stock available, but they're really looking at the infinite capability of online to deliver the transaction and the fulfillment of the product. And the stores seem to be focused on becoming more brand centers and experience centers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was reflected throughout all of the sort of NRF show itself as well. Like whenever you went through there with all the different sort of displays that were on show, was really showing that the bricks and mortar store had that vital role to play for the brand itself in terms of connecting all touch points and making a really sort of immersive and inspirational experience of the brand, which can't be done online. So that was really interesting to see.
Fantastic. And back in Australia, through that November, December last year's peak period, what were the new interesting trends that you saw through that period? Certainly was highly active.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a definite growth in that period from previous years. What was the fascinating part was the real prevalence of Cyber Week as being the key sales festival. It's obviously has taken quite a few number of years for it to get to that point here in Australia. It's obviously been in US for a long time, but to see it suddenly sort of really jump this year as a key sales festival was really interesting. Potentially timing had a lot to do with that too. I mean, being that last weekend in November, beginning of December, like you're leading right up into Christmas, which is peak selling season anyway, and it just sort of coincided with this sort of consumer needs there. So for us, it also meant then a transition of sales where we'd normally see November being the big month because of that sort of falling between the 2 months. A lot of it actually shifted to the beginning of December as well. So it was a very interesting period to see the use of Salesforce was more than anything be that real peak period throughout all of that. But we definitely saw, like to James's point before, where Boxing Day, it grew, but it's definitely in the shadow of Cyber Week, where it wouldn't have been previously.
Yeah, it certainly has changed significantly Just a reminder also, anyone who wants to get questions in, we'll be following up this shortly with Q&A. But back to you, Amanda. The 2XU digital commerce customer. So who is the 2XU digital commerce customer, and how do you market to that customer? Because you've got a very, very specific product.
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, our customer is anyone who has a passion for exercise and wants to better themselves through physical activity. When we look globally, the digital customer sort of varies quite widely by country. I mean, globally, we're sort of a 50-50 split in gender, and our age group focus tends to be between 25 to 44. But we see in Australia, gender split is skewed more towards the female demographic. But when we look to the other end of, say, Japan, we've got almost an 80% male demographic towards the older end of the age groups in the 35 to 44. So it really does vary widely by every country that we sell in. So what we do is we tend to focus our energy onto 3 real key fields of play. So the running, the training, and triathlon. And we tell relevant brand and product stories via our online channels that those specific audiences are on. Obviously, it's going to vary depending on their key fields of play and also their age and their gender. But our marketing strategy overall will include owned, paid, earned online placements. We nurture our new and existing audiences with messaging that's really relevant to them and what part of the journey they're on as well. So our real aim is to create knowledge and interest in the brand. Secondary to that is enticing them to convert, because I think at this point in time, our focus is really now on the customer, what they want, what they need, what do they want to know from us as a brand, and really creating that loyalty and getting them to understand us and create that community and get them to know what we stand for, rather than just making a transactional sort of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I wanted to ask that question. And I imagine that content and engagement is really paramount to engaging the 2XU customer. Probably don't make a lot of purchases per annum, or it might be once every couple of years that they make a purchase with you. So
correct.
I imagine retaining those customers throughout those gaps between purchases is really something that you have to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. And it's quite a technical product too, to understand the benefits of it and what it means to you. I mean, it's going to mean something different to everyone. So really understanding that consumer and what it could mean to them is quite important.
All right, so final question, 2020 for 2XU, what are you focusing on for the year ahead?
It's probably a lot of the things that we've already sort of gone through in the previous slide, so it's good to know we're on the right track. It's really about sort of personalization, really devising strategies and collecting data sort of in a structure that's going to enable us to personalize going forward in a manner that our customers really expect. We want to be able to tell our story better to these groups of consumers, but of course we can't do that without having the data behind all of that that's actually going to drive that. So we'll use that data to inform our user journeys, loyalty programs, and our on-site experiences as well. Really focusing on global markets. US is a key focus for us. While we're there, we can go harder and go stronger. So US, as well as further expansion into sort of Europe and Asian markets. For each of these markets, our approach is going to differ in each region. I know you spoke to before about marketplaces and that they're really sort of not as dominant as we sort of think, but in some of these markets they actually are, in some of the Asian markets. But I think the difference there is that really they can give that premium brand experience that we're looking for. So when we're looking to say an Asian market, we would probably focus predominantly on marketplaces first, with the direct-to-consumer supporting that once the brand is strong enough, because they can give the experience we need them to. The right marketplaces, of course, but when we look to say US or Australia or Europe, that approach would be different, and marketplaces would be used as a support to direct-to-consumer and only ever where that brand is really in play. Sustainability is obviously a key one for everyone. We need to really, and we'll look to review our online practices, updating or changing them to ensure we're introducing sustainable options wherever possible. It's really important as a company that we do the right things and we're actually acting as a vehicle for change. One of the things I have noted though through all of these reports that we're reading is that while our consumers are expecting sustainability, they're often not necessarily willing to pay for it. So one of those things is that really we're going to have to review the practices we're wanting to implement and making them actually financially viable as well. And then I think
Yeah,
probably
I
the
think
final one. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay.
was just going to say, I see that as a challenge across the board because you're getting asked to provide your sustainability credentials, which is fair enough. But on the flip side, consumers aren't willing to pay more. So does it come out of margin? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's something that every company is going to be facing and everyone should be doing anyway. So it's just really trying to get after that and I guess as a community sort of do the right thing. And I think probably the final thing we're looking on at the moment for 2020 is really the payment options. As you alluded to before, there's a lot more choice in the market now than there has been before. Really now getting after those sort of buy now, pay later solutions. We have Afterpay here and in the US, but obviously Klarna's entering the market now, and you've got other buy now, pay later solutions like Latitude, etc. Obviously Apple Pay and Google Pay, etc. They're all necessary. With so many transactions being on mobile, you can't not have those as payment options either. So that's the other one we're really getting after this year. Fantastic.
Well, look, that's all we've got time for. We do have a bit of time for Q&A, but I really want to thank you for that, Amanda. Great insights into your views and two times you. I know you're an experienced campaigner in this space, so everyone listening today is a privilege to have your knowledge. I'll also invite James back and then just hand back to Ali to kick off our Q&A session.
Well, it's an excellent session, guys. And it's really exciting to see what's going to happen with e-commerce in the future. I'm more than excited to actually be involved as well. So we do have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, some from the audience and some of our own. Just to James, going back to your part of the presentation, you said that you were focusing more back to basics and focusing more on the customer. So how far do you actually have to go? Because it seems impossible to make a profit if you've got to cater to the demands of consumers who want fast, free shipping, free returns, coupons, cashback, everything else under the sun. So how do retailers keep their margins?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think encapsulates some of the elements that Grant just mentioned about potentially those consumer demands and the appetite there. The way I look at it is there's a baseline of retail hygiene. So there are pieces that consumers expect that every retailer can provide, and they will differ slightly by subsector, but it's like having things such as click and collect available. It's having your stock available when it's in the right time. It's having the interaction capabilities so that you can interact with their service teams in whatever channel that the consumer's choosing. So there's some basic elements there. What I would say though is really focus on and understand your customer. I think Amanda called out some really key points there. So a 2XU customer will be different from another brand. So really understanding that. And I would suggest that it's focusing on some key areas of focus rather than trying to be everything to everybody. So the risk is that you try and spread yourself too thin and do everything, but by focusing on some really key areas that are going to differentiate you as the retailer will allow you to provide that discount for the right customer if that's relevant for your strategy, but it might be providing value in some other way for a customer that is going to have a higher lifetime value for you anyway. So I'd really strongly encourage retailers to make sure they're thinking about what that consumer journey looks like and who their customer is.
Wonderful. And to Amanda, how do you manage maintaining a brand and pricing?
In what way? In terms of the promotional part of it, is that correct? I understand the question.
This is a question from the audience, so I don't have much more to elaborate with that one, I'm afraid.
Okay, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. So how do you manage maintaining brand and pricing?
Okay, so I'm guessing it's probably going towards the more promotional aspect of it.
Might be in reference to using marketplaces and other outlets, I guess, versus the core mothership.
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one in itself. I mean, obviously we know in Australia you cannot dictate pricing in any way or form. So really it's about having a brand that offers value that is wanted by consumers to purchase it at a full price. So that's you're sort of mitigating that discount or that pricing sort of issue there. I think globally in the businesses I've been in, it's actually been quite difficult from a pricing perspective to have any sort of real control besides a recommended retail and giving the best service on your own websites and through your own stores, so that a consumer wants to come to your brand and interact with your brand at a full price. There's always going to be competitors out in the market who are going to be getting grey channel products, who are going to be discounting the product. I think the only sort of, I guess, retaliation against that sort of practice is really giving the best consumer experience and knowing your consumer intimately and getting that loyalty from them that can cope with that sort of pricing issue. And I'm really sorry, I hope I answered that question to what they're intending there.
Well, fantastic. So thank you guys so much for this session. It's just been incredible and I've definitely learned a lot. If you wanted to re-watch the webinar in your own time, we will be sending out all of the attendees a link after the webinar is finished. So thanks to Amanda, to James, and to Grant. And thank you to everyone who attended this session. It's been fantastic. And we're just going to go back to James quickly just to wrap up.
Wonderful, thanks, Ali. And just to wrap up, I shared a number of the research reports here around the Connected Shoppers report, and also insights from Salesforce Holiday Insights, looking at global and ANZ trends. So they are available. We'll share those with you after the webinar. And as Ali mentioned, we'll also share the full copy of the report with you then as well. So thanks, Grant. Thanks, Ali. And thank you very much, Amanda, for sharing everything in our session.
Thanks, everyone. And we know there were a question or two that didn't quite make it in, but we'll make sure that James is able to respond to those after the webinar. So thanks, everyone, for attending. We'll wrap it up there. And thanks to our great speakers, James and Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you.